will be recording the event. I just want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. If you don't want to have your camera on, that is absolutely fine. We understand. So again, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's event, which is Activating Your Talent Development Strategy with Caitlin Hensey, who is the founder of Passion to Profit Consulting. So my name is Katerina. I am the Associate VP for the Southeastern Wisconsin chapter. And before we begin with our workshop, there are a couple of things that I would like to mention regarding upcoming events. So our next event is April 19th, and this is the Multi-Generational Working Styles and Values virtual event, where through this session, participants will have the opportunity to learn how to define key motivators for all generations in their workplace. Next, on April 26th, we have the new member orientation. If you recently became a member, or hopefully after this event, you might consider becoming a member of our association, this is a great opportunity to learn how to get the most of the benefits through this membership. May 10th, we have the Performance Improvement PDN regarding process performance. So through this session, you will explore how to use Process Lens to make visible performance improvements. May 17th, we have the Instructional Design PDN Kickoff, where the purpose of this session is to provide a sense of community for our instructional designers while helping them build their skills and providing various resources. Last but not least, June 28th, we have the Training Delivery PDN. It's not about you, it's about the learner. Where through this session, you will practice identifying and overcoming assumptions about learners often held by trainers. So at this point, I would like to thank our sponsors for their continuous support, starting with Kara Group, and they are our Platinum Chapter sponsor. MRA, they are one of our Gold Chapter sponsors, just like Steward Leadership. And then last but not least, Focus Training, who is our Silver Chapter sponsor. Now, what are the benefits of becoming a member of this chapter? Why should somebody partake more actively? I would say the number one is talent development upskilling, because this is a great opportunity through this experience and collaboration to gain great insight into industry trends and best practices. Through interacting with our board members, you will have the opportunity to build your personal and professional credibility by becoming part of an inclusive professional community. This is a great way to meet new individuals, build relationships, and of course, have a more well-rounded understanding of the career path that you would like to take. So with that in mind, we offer leadership opportunities for everyone at all career levels, regardless of whether you just started in the field or you have 30 years of experience. This is a great way not only to develop your leadership opportunities, but also further grow your critical thinking and problem-solving skills, and of course, learn how to better define your personal and professional brand. For example, one of the things that our members mainly express is the fact that they really enjoy that sense of community that we offer. We really do strive as a chapter to provide a positive, welcoming experience for everyone. Now, through this, you can also become a power member. What is a power member? You can become a member of our chapter, but at the same time, become a member of the Association for Talent Development, which is the parent organization of our chapter. And again, through this experience, through this membership, you will have the opportunity to access various ATD national resources, various events, community, and leadership opportunities. You will have the opportunity to acquire additional knowledge and skills and overall further develop your capabilities. This is also a great opportunity for you to volunteer if you're interested. This will help you gain experience for your career. And if I may share my personal experience, this is kind of how I started my involvement with the chapter a year ago. I started as a volunteer, and one of the things that I noticed is that it will truly give you a more well-rounded understanding of the training field and how it operates. If you're interested, once again, please go ahead and talk to one of our board members today. And now going back to Caitlin and our event for the day. So Caitlin launched Passion to Profit Consulting because she likes to help teams continuously evolve their strategy through enhancing their culture, developing their leaders, and using practical tools to navigate organizational change. Her superpower is solving complex problems and helping teams get unstuck. Caitlin, welcome and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Katerina, and hello, everyone. Can I just see a couple of thumbs up and make sure you can see my screen before we go any further? Okay, thank you very much. Just like to make sure the technology works. It is wonderful to see some familiar faces, people that I've known for several years, as well as some new faces. And I will introduce myself a little bit more fully in a minute. But before I do that, I'd love to get to know all of you. Since we have about 40 people on the call, I'm not going to have everyone unmute and do a personal introduction, but I'd love for you to put in the chat, if you feel comfortable, some of the aspects that you love most about your job and what interests you in today's topic, why you ended up signing up at 8:30 a.m. on a Friday morning. So feel free to put that in the chat and we'll just get a good sense of who's in the room and what our passions are. Yeah, seeing people grow. I see a lot of either sharing knowledge, teaching, learning, and helping with growth. Creating solutions. This is awesome. Yes, helping others. And connecting people's gifts to what they do in their job. Great. Lots of commonality here. I love the just passion that we all have around helping people thrive in their workplace and also encouraging people to learn, grow, and develop as they progress throughout their careers. So as we move forward, I will give you a little bit of a taste of me and what I do. So as Katerina mentioned, I am the owner, founder of Passion to Profit Consulting. I started my business about a year ago, mostly as just a side hustle hobby, something that I really enjoyed doing because I found that there was a gap between helping people become engaged in retaining employees, creating a thriving workplace, and also helping businesses accomplish their strategic goals, become profitable, or if they're a nonprofit, raise fundraising dollars. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to create my own solution. And that turned into what I call continuous strategy iteration, which essentially combines human-centered design concepts, OKR methodology, which if you're unfamiliar is a goal setting methodology, and my HR and change management background, which is centered around people and helping to create that thriving workplace. So I do this through a variety of different offerings and solutions. If you are interested in learning more about exactly what I do and how I work with my clients or support HR teams, I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you, but you'll get a little bit of a taste of it today by engaging in some interactive brainstorming group discussions, as well as some large group discussions on how we take our talent development strategy and goals and actually see those through so we can accomplish what we set out to do. We are going to start with a little game. So the first piece is going to involve raising of hands. The first piece is raise your either physical or virtual hand if you have developed strategic goals for your talent development or HR team. Okay, I see several hand raises. So we have a decent amount of people who have some sort of strategic goals. Now, leave your hand raised if those goals have both quantitative and qualitative success metrics. Quantitative being numerical, qualitative being measurement based on people's feedback, thoughts, opinions, feelings. All right. Now, leave your hand raised still if those strategic goals for your talent development or HR team are directly aligned to the strategic goals of your larger organization, if you've made that connection. Awesome. Still a bunch of hands. This is great. And then finally, leave your hand raised if you discuss how to align the work that your team does with those strategic goals on a weekly basis. If you're having those consistent conversations around, here's the work that we're doing, here's how they're connected to our talent development goals. Okay. Few less hands. We have some superstars in the room that are already knocking this out of the park. But certainly, as you can see, the hand raises dropped off as we went down this ladder. And I am going to help us today come up with a very simple approach of how we can get from setting our goals to actually aligning and prioritizing the work that we do in order to meet those goals and making intentional trade-offs to free up our time in order to achieve what we actually want to accomplish. So let's start with the basics. In order to make a critical impact as a talent development or HR leader, your strategic goals will really need to have two specific components. The first piece is alignment to the business goals, which, as we found out through the hand raises, many of you are already doing, which is awesome. But it's not necessarily enough to have the alignment in your own mind or even have an alignment among your team of, oh, we know how this particular goal aligns to the business goal. It's also important to create that alignment with the business themselves. So helping them understand how what you're doing as part of your talent development strategy connects to the larger business objectives, goals, aspirations as a whole. The second piece is alignment to customer needs. Now, I'd venture to guess that most of you have internal customers, meaning that the people that you serve are within your organization. There may be a couple of consultants on the call that do have external customers, but regardless, we all have people that we serve with our talent development products. That might be the training that we conduct, the workshops that we facilitate, the one-on-one coaching if we do some of that type of work, content and instructional design that we create, anything that we produce can be considered our products or our services. So in order to really have powerful strategic goals, we need to make sure that we understand what our customers' needs are and align those goals to the specific customer needs. So these are the two particular components that you can go back and just double check your goals to see if they meet these. So how do we actually do this? That's the big question. I have developed a 5-step continuous strategy iteration process that can apply to any sort of goals. It could be personal goals, team-specific goals. Today we're talking about talent development goals, business goals, any sort of team or organization as a whole. We're going to go through each of these 5 steps and apply those to talent development strategy, talent development professionals, since that's what most of you are, and see how this might play out and how you can go through each of these 5 steps. I will say that in the continuous strategy iteration process, this is not necessarily a linear like step by step, we complete step 1 at the start of the year and then get to step 5 and then great, we're done. And we can just, do what we want the rest of the year. It does need to be continuously revisited, which is why the last question in our initial hand raise game was reviewing those goals and aligning the teamwork on a weekly basis. Now, if you're just starting this, maybe it's monthly, maybe it's even quarterly, but at least on some sort of iterative cadence. So the first part of this is to create some sort of vision that is an ideal future state. Many of you might be used to setting long-term visions or 5-year strategic plans or even 10-year strategic plans, looking way, way far out into the future. I do still think there's a purpose for that. It's nice to kind of envision what might we look like in 10 years from now. And at the same time, our world is evolving at such a rapid pace that oftentimes we have no idea what's going to happen even 3 months from now, let alone 5 or 10 years from now. The organization might be bought out or not even exist anymore or have a completely different product line. So I just encourage us to look at the end of the year. So typically we do this process at the beginning of the year or maybe, mid-year, and we check in, but I imagine what we might want things to look and feel like at the end of the year or the end of a given time period. So when you are doing this visioning exercise, a couple of thought-provoking questions that might stimulate some key points for you is, if you imagine yourself on December 31st of 2024, what impact has your team made in your organization or for your customers? What's the impact or the outcome that you've delivered? What are some problems that you've solved? And how has your work positively impacted the business specifically? This is all hypothetical because none of us have, at least I don't believe any of us have, a crystal ball where we can see what is actually going to happen on December 31st. But it allows us to dream a little bit, exercise our creative brain space, and really get excited and inspired about what our future state might be. So I'm going to pause myself talking for 2 minutes and just give you all some time to reflect. This exercise certainly takes more than 2 minutes and can be done within your team, but I want to get your wheels turning. And even if you have your strategic goals, which many of you do, you can still reflect back on this. So I'm going to pause for 2 minutes and just give you the opportunity to jot down some notes, or if you feel brave and want to share your notes in the chat, you're welcome to do that related to any of these questions. I should say, if you do have a question or are confused, feel free to shout that out or put that in the chat as well.
No responses yet, Caitlin. I don't know if you stumped them. I think they're still thinking.
Yes, that's fine. And if you want to just write down your notes on your own, that's fine too. This is more personal reflection. And if you are brave and want to share in the chat, you're welcome to. All right. This is always where I think, oh man, I should have had some sort of fun music. But sometimes silence is is good for us to get a little uncomfortable. Does anyone feel comfortable coming off of mute or putting in the chat one of their responses to these questions, a thought that it provoked for you? No
I'll
one?
share.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Yolanda.
I was gonna say I'll share because I'm going through it right now. So I feel like it I'm trying to be realistic. So when you say the end of the year, not through eternity, I'm trying to be really realistic about what we can do by December, end of the year. So I wrote down the successful rollout of a phase one learning and development program. And when I say phase one, we're pulling together we're recycling a lot of resources, but we're pulling it together under a new rollout of how we're introducing it to the organization. So just being honest about, I just wanted to be successful in our phase one of that rollout and being honest about what we can do based on we're almost halfway into the year. So
Yes, yes. And I love that you mentioned the balance of realistic and inspirational, because that is really important for this exercise. And that's why the continuously iterative approach to strategy development and activation is so helpful, I think, because it allows us to tangibly see, oh yeah, okay, we can really do this, and it gets us inspired. And once we do accomplish that, then we can add on to that and then see how it can keep progressing. And thank you, Lydia, for putting your response in the chat as well. I love how you're, incorporating some of the different components of your small team to integrate those strategies into, the larger department. So hopefully this makes sense. It is definitely an exercise that takes time. And if you are someone who works with a team, I encourage you to do it with a team. I facilitated some awesome sessions for clients of mine that get whiteboards and flip charts and post-it notes and all those fun tools up, or use Miro if we're virtual. And everyone can kind of put their thoughts around these few questions. And it's really fun to see the variety of responses and to let people get a little bit creative and have that buy-in when creating the goals for your team. So that's step one. Step two is to identify synergies or key themes. I call this, and this kind of goes back to my design thinking background, the divergence to convergence steps. So divergence first is let's get creative, come up with all sorts of wild and crazy ideas, which is what we did in the first step. And then the convergence is identifying some key themes that we can use to form our goals. So in this step, you'll want to look through your responses from the first step around the impact, the outcome, how you've helped the business, and also look at the vision or the goals for your organization as a whole to identify the synergies. So the first thing I like to say are, what are some of the big things that we want to accomplish this year that will help the business with also what they want to accomplish? So for example, let's just say the business has a goal to increase revenue or increase sales numbers. Usually many for-profit businesses have some sort of goal around revenue or sales. And then our team has come up with a goal around developing a leader readiness, emerging leader readiness program to help equip leaders to be more prepared in their roles. Well, we could say, well, why are we doing this? Well, we want to help give them the skills and capabilities ultimately to create more highly productive teams, to decrease new leader retention or new leader turnover rates. And so we can kind of make that connection to say, if we're able to equip leaders with the skills to lead more productively and have these highly effective teams, then ultimately the business will likely see more success from a profitability standpoint. It's not a guarantee, but we can at least make that connection based on prior experience and data. So when you're thinking about those themes, you'll want to think about the big things that come out. Again, the impact is huge. You'll hear me mention this a couple of times. The impact, the outcome, what you're actually able to tangibly see. And then the final piece is, where do we need to focus first in order to make a long-term impact in other areas? I'll repeat the question because this is one that many of the groups that I work with find really helpful. Where do we need to focus first in order to make a long-term impact in other areas? So Yolanda actually gave a great example when she mentioned the phase one, because rather than saying we're going to create this entire program, we're focusing on just first phase, and that will allow us to see more benefit down the road to the larger program. This question's also helpful if you're the type of person or team that has like 12 different goal ideas. And it's like, well, okay, I'm signing myself up for a lot of work. You can kind of look at those 10 to 12 ideas and try to encourage people to really whittle it down to 3. Say, all right, where do we really need to focus first in order to make a longer term impact in some of these other areas? Any questions related to these first 2 steps? These are more visionary, thought-provoking steps. Do I have any questions or anything that seems confusing before we move on? All right. Well, if you do have questions, feel free to pop it in the chat or come off mute. So now we're actually going to get to creating our overarching goal. Oh, sorry, Lydia, I just saw it. You said, can you clarify big things? So big things, yes, I understand that that's vague. That could be either, big things could be either like big projects, big programs, big tasks, something that you really want to roll out or do, or it could relate to the impact. So the impact is something like lower turnover rates or increased engagement or growing our workforce by 10%. So they're kind of the big overarching goals. You could probably replace big things with goal if you really want to, but this allows it to be a little bit more squishy in this stage before we go to defining in the next stage. Does that help? Okay, hopefully. So the next piece is to go to actually creating our overarching strategic goals. So I like to help people form goals using, as I mentioned in the beginning, the objective and key result, or OKR methodology. And that methodology encourages us to have the objective statements, which are ultimately the goals, be statements of intent and directional guidance without being specifically tied to a strategy. So it's more tied to, what does the environment, the company, the culture look like and feel like at the end of the year versus I'm going to complete this project. The project piece is still extremely important, and that comes in when we get to the tasks and some of the success metrics, but it allows us to keep this directional guidance and then get creative on how we might actually do that by the end of the year. And the other important piece, going back to the beginning, is that it is connected to the business. So I'll give you all an example because I think sometimes that's helpful to make it more tangible. Yolanda, do you mind if I use your original comment about completing phase 1 of the program?
You certainly can.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to have you be my guinea pig. I appreciate that. And I can pick on Yolanda because she's my friend. So we're all good. I know she doesn't mind. So Yolanda, with completing phase 1, what are some of the impacts that you're hoping that makes on your organization?
Well, definitely and I'll admit, I think we have done a good job with connecting it to the larger enterprise strategic priorities, right? So it's about, we're going through a lot of change. And so in this space, we're able to add value to the organization as a whole, because what we're doing is we're trying to present new skills that will impact us working differently as an organization, whether it's at this level or at the individual level, all the way down at all levels of the organization. And this is also tied to the need. This is what people want. This is what they've asked for on our employee engagement, is professional development and learning and development opportunities. So
Mm-hmm.
it's important that we are listening to the customer, right? So in this is a stakeholder, and it's
Yes.
to improve the employee experience overall, thinking about the full life cycle. It was important that whether you're coming in and we're onboarding you, or your mid-career or your confused career level. I always say that I've gone through that where you don't know where you are. You're just figuring out what you want to be when you grow up. And then you have people that are rounding out. They're very high level and they're looking for ways to expose themselves to new things, learn new things because they're interested in a promotion, or even on their way out and they're retiring and they're still developing themselves. So we've made it really about the employee experience and how we're leveraging them to invest in our biggest asset, our people.
Yes. Yes. So a couple things that I guess I'll pull out from what you were saying. It's about increased engagement and development for the employees. And you mentioned it is something that they asked for. It's about equipping the organization to work more effectively and collaboratively together. And it's about helping to equip people with the skills to navigate through some of the changes that the organization is going through. So rather than having your goal be complete phase one of the employee development program, you could have the strategic statement of intent objective could be create a workplace where employees collaborate together and feel inspired to grow professionally. That may not be the best worded statement because I'm just making things up off the top of my head, but you can kind of see the difference. And I at least think that the second statement is much more inspiring than just to complete phase one of the project. Now, you're still going to complete phase one of the project. However, you're helping people understand the impact and the outcome that you're going to make by doing that. Does that make sense, or is that still really muddy for a lot of you?
I think it was helpful. I'll be honest, as a L&D professional for many years, it's been hard to get exposure and to make the connections and the true value of L&D for the larger strategic goals of an organization. I don't know if everyone has experienced that, but it's difficult sometimes to reveal the value and make that overall connection for our senior leadership team. And I think that statement that you gave off the top of your head, I think it kind of rolls into how we look at the overall strategies. That's how we kind of write it. So it feels very strategic, right? So
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes. And thanks, Cheryl, for putting the comment in the chat. It is something, it's something that employees can embrace. So it takes a little bit of thought. It's definitely a mindset shift from the way that a lot of times we set our goals. And I do find it really useful in helping to, one, get the business buy-in, as Yolanda mentioned, because they're like, oh yeah, we want a more productive workforce that's collaborative and engaged, where they might not necessarily care about your program. I don't mean to diminish your programs, but sometimes, some business leaders, as we all know, are like, okay, another program my employees have to attend, but if they know that it's going to create this outcome that they care about, it's helpful to get that buy-in. So to sum up kind of this first piece, the qualities of an amazing strategic goal or objective is that it's aspirational yet realistic. We talked about that. It's a true statement of intent. So the kind of litmus test for this is that it doesn't start with an action verb that is do this or, talk about this. It's really, this is how I'm going to describe the ideal future state. And it pulls in language from the overall company values, vision, company goals. So what the business leaders care about, and you can kind of weave that into your strategic goals. We are going to go into our first breakout session. You all hopefully received a copy of the slides yesterday, so you can reference that in your breakout room and go back to other slides. If you want to take a quick screenshot of this slide, you're welcome to. But we're going to have 15 minutes in groups of 3 to 4 to share some of what's going through your mind after talking about these first few steps of our talent development strategy. So if you want to, you can share a theme that you identified as a focus area, either something that's percolating in your mind or something that you might have done before. With the help of some of your teammates in the room, come up with a sample, strategic goal that meets the criteria that's on. Let's see if I can go back. That meets the criteria on this slide. Doesn't have to be perfect, but come up with a sample. And then you can use, again, the qualities to help create that. I will give you a tip that I have used with a couple of clients, in that ChatGPT is actually a really great resource for helping come up with objective statements or goals or statements of intent. Of course, we need to be careful of not putting any company confidential information in there. However, oftentimes the goals don't have any confidential information. But if you have some notes on a piece of paper and you're like, hey, I want to incorporate this word and this theme and a little bit of this, and you just type into ChatGPT, can you create an inspirational and realistic objective statement that incorporates these 5 bullet points? It'll spit something out. Sometimes you look at it and you're like, I don't like that, but at least gives you a thought starter. Sometimes it surprises you and it does a really good job at creating one for you. It's not cheating, it's just utilizing your resources. So we are going to pause the recording, send you into the breakout rooms. Before I do that, is there Awesome. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had some fruitful discussions in your breakout rooms. Before we move on to the last few phases of our strategy activation process, I'd love to see if anyone is brave enough to share an example of a strategic goal statement that meets our criteria with the large group, and we can see some more examples. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing an example? It does not have to be perfect.
She never shuts up.
Oh, we've got somebody on, not on mute.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
Yes, I assume that wasn't the goal. So that would be funny if that was.
Whoever that is, they got to shut up from now on.
Yeah. Does anyone have a statement of intent, strategic goal that they want to share?
I guess I could go since I'm unmuted.
Thanks, Andy.
So we are looking at using AI to categorize all of our material. And so our aspirational thing is to be, we're a staff of several facilitators. And there'll be times where organizations that we work with want this topic and that topic, and we may modify some of our programs to do that. So our aspiration is to be able to easily know what's out there, so both our experienced and our newer instructors can, use material that will help meet the customer's needs. And so the goal, do you want the goal too, or just the aspiration so far?
Yeah, state the goal if you have it.
All right, so we're using AI to categorize all of our program materials to help instructors find the best materials for facilitating specific topics by the end of the year. So there's my SMART goal on that.
Awesome. Awesome. So I think if we kind of go down the list, it seems aspirational, but realistic. I don't work with Andy, but I'm sure that it is. It is in some senses, a statement of intent. You could, if you would like a little bit of feedback, just take out the piece about using AI, because that's how you're going to do it. That goes more into the task, and really just focus on the impact. And that can kind of be your overarching goal. And then you all can double check whether it pulls in some language from the company values, vision, and overall goals. So thank you, Andy, for being a brave volunteer. Does anyone else feel comfortable sharing? Maybe we'll take one more.
No, not after Andy's.
Lydia, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know that we fully followed the script, but we had a really great conversation. But so we talked about in terms of goal, aspirational yet realistic. Like in our organization, there's a huge emphasis on the employee culture, and the goal being I think senior leadership is really emotionally attached to the fact that we have a lot of tenure in our organization, like 20-year, 30-year club type employees, and they want to maintain that type of tenure within the organization. But the way that people select their careers has changed. So aspirational yet realistic is that we want to develop learning that helps the associate see their place in the organization as one that they can grow throughout their career through the learning experiences that we're developing. Our company has very established values, vision, and goals. So our company even has a culture statement that says that we have to support one another first so that we can extend those relationships to our associates and others.
That's awesome. So you weaved in something that is aspirational and realistic, and certainly connects to the overall company goals. The hardest part that is probably true for any of us, but that I heard from both you, Lydia, and Andy, is just separating out that outcome impact from the how you're going to do it. Yes, the how you're going to do it's really important. We are getting there, I promise. But to make a really amazing strategic goal that packs you with a punch, and that people can. Some people say, an amazing strategic goal is memorable, or memorizable. So people can go, your team can pull it out of their memory easy. So short, impactful statements. But I appreciate you both sharing the examples. Again, this is an iterative process. It's a work in progress. You don't have to be perfect the first time, but hopefully you had some nice discussions with your friends in the breakout rooms that gave you some things to think about in ways that you can interweave some of these qualities and steps into your current strategic goals. So the next piece, as we get a little bit more granular, is how will we actually show impact? So this is where we get to the quantitative and qualitative metrics component. Because it is wonderful to have these inspirational and aspirational goals that connect to the company and have the impact. And at the end of the day, we actually have to show that we're making progress towards that. Otherwise, it stays in this fuzzy land of hypothetical that we can't prove what we're doing. So when we think about metrics, a lot of times we have heard, we got to have numbers in the metrics. They have to be quantitative. We have to, show values, and those are important. And I also think having some qualitative metrics are really helpful, especially for us as learning and development or HR professionals, because sometimes we can't have numerical metrics for how someone feels or responds or how their job changes after they have taken one of your workshops or gone through a program that you create. So in the metrics piece, the first piece is focusing, if you can, on outcomes versus outputs. So an easy example that I have that sometimes people use is percentage of attendance in training programs. So a lot of times we'll see a metric around, 90% of leaders go through the emerging leader development program. And that is, it's definitely a good metric. It tells us people actually went through the program. But what it doesn't say is, did people attend and multitask the whole time? Did they attend and not pay attention and weren't listening? Did they attend and then not use the skill sets that we taught them? Like, what is actually the outcome? So if you're able to say, all right, what is the result that we want to get from 90% of leaders attending this program? It's about effective leadership skills. How can we measure that? Is there a question on your engagement survey? Asks employees to rate the quality of their managers' leadership skills. Is there a way that you can hold focus groups with employees and ask them, how have you seen your leader progress? Have 360-degree reviews to get employee feedback on their leaders, or even self-assessment, where I've seen some organizations have leaders rate their capabilities on certain qualities prior to the training or the program versus after. And you can tell the difference that way. The skill of effective communication improved by 20%. So some of these are still, a little bit of rough metrics, but it at least gets us a bit closer to outcomes versus outputs. So that's one example. I also like to think about headlights versus taillights. So let's try to think of some metrics that can project us into the future and help us make changes versus rate something in the past. So for example, again, with like engagement survey scores, we may have, employee engagement survey scores increased from 20 to 25, out of 30 or something. Now that measure of time, if you're doing your engagement surveys once or twice a year, is probably a little bit outdated by the time you collect the data. So are you able to incorporate some surveys or some additional techniques to gather more input from people throughout the year? You'll want to define acceptance criteria for any sort of task or how that you implement. So if it is developing a new program, completing the pilot phase, rolling out a new AI tool, what is our definition of done and what does success look like? Sometimes we think this is obvious and then we're surprised down the road when someone thinks we've accomplished the task or the main how component of the goal, and others say, wait, we're not done yet. This wasn't our goal. So defining this up front, what does success look like? What's our definition of done? And then we talked about the quantitative and qualitative. If it's possible, I like to have X to Y metrics. So we are at X, which is current state. We move to Y, which is future state. And that allows us to track progress iteratively throughout the year. If we just say, 90% of leaders are confident in their ability to effectively communicate and change, that seems like a good metric, but we don't know if we're starting at 10% or if we're starting at 70%. So having that to from metric allows us to say, all right, in January, we were at 20%. In April, we're at 25%. In August, we jumped up to 40%. So it allows us to see like either we're making progress towards the end state or we're staying still or potentially even moving backwards. So these are some of the qualities that you will weave into your success metrics. Does anyone have an example of a really good either qualitative or quantitative metric that you currently use within your organization to measure success of your talent development programs or work? I know several of you raised your hand saying you had good success metrics, or you at least have success metrics. Yeah, go ahead, Andy. Sorry, I didn't see your physical hand at first.
Yeah, I didn't want to be the only one talking, but
Go for it.
we have implemented Net Promoter Score.
Oh, awesome.
As a way to kind of judge. We only get level one, often only get level one evaluation. So we want it to be the best level one we can get. And so really looking to what was gained from the learner. And it's a high standard, but we have high standards for our instructors. So it's working pretty well for us.
That's awesome. And for those who may not be familiar, Net Promoter Score typically, and you can let me know if this differs at your organization, but Net Promoter Score is typically based on one question. How likely are you to recommend this company, this team, this program to your friends and family? It's usually on a scale of 1 to 10. The 9 and 10 is an active promoter, and then the 1 to 5 is detractors, and then 6 to 8 is usually neutral. So you're striving to have active promoters. Is that kind of how you're doing Net Promoter Score, Andy?
Yeah, it's pretty close. So
Okay.
devil's in the details, but yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yes. So that's a great example of a metric. Anyone else want to share an example?
I guess I have a question.
Sure.
If anyone could share, because it's more time consuming to compile the qualitative data.
Mhm.
And what are some things people are doing? Because it is time consuming, and we usually sometimes we don't spend as much time there because of
Mhm.
the consumption of time that it takes to
Mhm. Mhm. I can certainly share some ideas, but I'd love to see if anyone in the group has some ideas first. Gathering qualitative data, any good tactics?
I can jump in with one of the tools we use to do our annual survey has built in a way to identify if a statement is positive, neutral, or
Mhm.
negative, which helps to, it's not 100% accurate because a lot of times the comments are, I really like this, but I didn't like that. And so, you know, it might not be 100% accurate, but it does get you a little closer and saves a little time.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, and I see a couple comments in the chat. Christy mentioned engagement survey, so it's probably more quantitative, retention rates. ChatGPT to summarize the open comment responses. I love that,
Ooh, I
Chris.
like that. Who is that? Chris? Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I actually I had hosted a workshop in February with a good friend who is just an AI guru overall. And we talked about how to use ChatGPT as an HR professional. And that was the example that she went through. So if anyone's interested in seeing that recording, I can share it to you afterwards. But she went through like, how do you take a survey results and use ChatGPT to pull out some of the key responses. And Liz, thanks for your response as well of doing the pre and post assessment perspectives from participants and their supervisors. I love that idea because then you're not just getting one person's take, because sometimes, you know, self-awareness is questionable depending on who the person is, but you're getting their employees or their supervisors' perspectives as well. A couple other thoughts that I have, creative techniques that don't take a ton of time. One is just through observation. You know, if you're a professional that's supporting leaders and you are in meetings with them consistently, or you and your colleagues are in meetings with them, just making note of some of the differences. You know, for example, if you want to assess like a psychologically safe environment within the team, in January, maybe only the leader talks. This is a real example from a client I'm working with now where it's literally 1 or 2 people that talk in the entire room. We're trying to create a psychologically safe work environment. So I'm in there observing, you know, how many times do other people pipe up and share conversations? Or when someone does share an idea, do people quickly shut it down? Or do people ask, that's interesting. Can you tell me a little more about that? So again, a little bit subjective, but observation's a great way. And then also, if you do have the time to do really quick empathy interviews or focus groups with some people that you know and trust will give you honest feedback. Just doing some, even just like 15-minute check-ins. You know, how are you feeling on your team? Or how's the workflow on your team if you want to measure productivity? So a couple different questions like that. All right, we're getting to the final steps. So after you have your goals, you have your vision, you have your goals, you have your aspirational, realistic statements of intent, you've got some good metrics. The next step is to gain buy-in. This is a very important step because if we don't do this, the likelihood that we'll actually accomplish what we want to do is not great. I'll just say it that way from my experience. So when you are sharing with your senior leaders, you will want to probably do 3 things over time. One is to align the work that your team is doing, the tasks, the projects, the programs, the workshops, whatever it is that you're doing, to business goals. So we're going to do this as a talent development or an HR team, and this is how it's going to align to business goals and our goals. Tell them what you need from them. Be very specific. Either we need to have you actively support our workshop by encouraging your leaders to attend, or we'd like you to film a couple of videos about why high engagement and collaboration is important for our culture. This is how we need you to be involved, and this is the I guess the support we're requesting. And then the last piece is showing consistent progress and being willing to pivot throughout the year. So if you do have frequent touch points with your senior leaders, this is where those success metrics come into play, especially those X to Y metrics, if they're quantitative or even qualitative, to say, here's some of the data from where we are now, or where we were in January. Here's where we are current state. And here's where we are as we move down throughout the road from January to April to August to October, so on and so forth. Because that will do 2 things primarily. It will show senior leaders like, oh yeah, they're actually making an impact and this is helpful. And they're hopefully going to be more likely to support and buy in going forward. And then the pivoting piece, if you're not making the progress that you want, because we all know sometimes we don't, it shows them that you're willing to be flexible and adapt to the changing needs of the business. So a really simple example that we all lived through is COVID. Many of you, if you were at your organizations or a talent development professional pre-COVID, you may have in January of 2020 had great plans for day-long workshops with all these different activities using whiteboards and fun stuff that related to in-person. COVID happened, we may have had to put either those training programs completely on hold or pivoted to doing something different. So that would be a great time to say, all right, let's look at what we set out to do. We have that aspirational, inspirational statement of intent as our goal. We don't have a specific strategy tied to it. So let's shift the work that we're doing, the programs that we're producing, content that we're delivering, and see how we can help us meet our goals in a different way. So before we wrap up, we are going to do one final breakout session. I'm actually going to let's do 7 minutes instead of 10, so we can have a little bit of time for me to wrap up and then me to hand it back over to Katerina to wrap up from an ATD perspective. So we're going to go back into great breakout rooms. You may be with different people, and just have an open discussion around the challenges that you faced gaining buy-in from senior leaders on your talent development strategy in the past, and then what might have helped you work with senior leaders to champion your strategy if you have had success. So Yolanda, if you can put people back into breakout rooms for 7 minutes, we'll give you some time to discuss and then come on back and wrap up. All right, awesome.
I think we got it right this time.
Yes, that was great. Super smooth.
Ladies, I'll be back in a couple of minutes, okay? Just giving you a heads up. I'm
Okay,
not
go
locking
ahead.
up, but I'll be right back.
Okay.
Awesome. And you pause the recording again?
Oh, I didn't. Thank you for telling.
Start the recording one final time. Hopefully you had some useful discussions in your final breakout room. I am not going to ask anyone to share live, but if you do put some thoughts around either challenges you've had or how you've overcome some of those challenges and gaining buy-in in the chat, you're welcome to do that. But I will wrap us up on a couple of additional or last notes. The one piece to success in all of this, everything that we talked about today from step 1 through step 5, is that mindset matters. And this is our own internal mindset and the mindset that we have of our teams before we actually try to change the mindset of business leaders. So the first piece on here, embrace the red as a learning opportunity. The red essentially just means success metrics that are behind target. So a lot of times we use the red, yellow, green system, stoplight system. Red means we're behind. Yellow means we're kind of lukewarm. Green means, yep, we're knocking it out of the park. If any of your metrics are in the red, use it as an opportunity to pivot. We can make changes and just ask, why is this? And what do we need to do differently? Explore things with curiosity versus judgment. Again, ask why, ask what the factors might be, ask what might be leading to a less than ideal accomplishment, rather than beating ourselves up, judging ourselves, blaming it on senior leaders for not encouraging their employees to attend our workshops, whatever is easy for us to do. Frequent celebrations of small wins is really helpful to keep the motivation of your team. And then the last piece, and probably my favorite, is we all contribute in this. So the work that we went through today does not have to be done by yourself. It is best done with your team and with others. Have fun with it. I do recommend that you carve some time out to actually do some of these practices. You don't have to do steps 1 through 5 in one session or one sitting, but have the dialogue discussions with your team, get their input, feed off of each other's creativity. And if you have the opportunity to, get some input from your customers, from your stakeholders, and let that help form some of your objective statements and metrics. So if you want to try to apply some of this quickly, you don't necessarily have to do all the steps perfectly right away. But there's 4 quick tips I'll lead you with. One is sharing your goals with a business leader and asking them for feedback. Instead of sharing to tell, share to ask for recommendations and show that you're open to shifting. Align your team goals and initiatives to the organization's strategy. You may have aligned them to your strategy, but help your team understand how the work that they do is connected to the bigger business goals. And then help your team prioritize that work based on goals. I do a whole separate workshop called Strategy Activation that really just focuses on the initiative piece, which we didn't even cover today. But that is looking at the entire swath of work that we have within our team, identifying how that work aligns to our goals once we have them set, and then being able to ask ourselves, if we don't really understand how this work aligns to our goals, should we even be doing it? And that allows us to make some intentional trade-offs and doing that on a consistent basis. Again, weekly might be a little ambitious to start with, so maybe do it monthly and go from there. And then talk about progress in team meetings. Help the team understand where we need to shift, how we've been moving forward in some areas, where we're stalled, and what we might do to support. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Katerina, to wrap up. You have received the slides. You will also get another copy with a follow-up as well as the recording. For those of you who I don't know that are interested in talking to me, you're welcome to find me on LinkedIn, or Katerina or Yolanda can share my email in the follow-up. I'd love to hear your feedback. And Katerina, that flows right into your wrap-up.
Thank you, Caitlin, for a wonderful job. This was a very beneficial and very informative workshop. The last thing I would like to mention is that we would like to hear from you. We're always looking for constructive feedback to ensure that our members' aspirations align with the projects that we currently work on, with our events. So please go ahead and scan this survey, this QR code in order to complete your survey, and let us know if you have any recommendations, if you think that maybe there are some things that we should change or improve, please let us know.
Katerina, I'm sorry, this is to interrupt, but I just looked and our admin has messed up and has not updated the survey. So the link isn't live on there, so I deeply apologize. You will be receiving an email with a link to the survey after the event. And then we will also let you know how you can access the recording. So I apologize, but I'd rather not have everybody waste their time. So
no worries. Thank you for letting me know, Sue. So at this point, once again, I would like to thank Caitlin for a wonderful job, all of you for being here with us today, and of course our sponsors for their ongoing support.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Happy Friday.
Thank you.
Happy Friday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
great job, guys.
All right. Thank you. I was just going to say, great job. Did a great job, Katerina. Thanks for partnering.
So did you. Thank you, guys.
Have a great weekend.
Have a good one. Thank you.